Every other Friday, Jake loved checking his bank account. His paycheck had arrived. For a brief moment, he felt rich. Then Monday morning came. Rent, car payment, credit card, phone bill, insurance. Buy now, pay later. Streaming subscriptions, gym membership. Before he'd bought a single gallon of ghee or a bag of groceries, nearly 70% of his paycheck already belonged to someone else. Michael received the exact same paycheck, yet Monday morning felt completely different. He paid his bills, transferred money into his investments, and barely thought about his finances for the rest of the week. How can two people earning exactly the same salary end up living completely different financial lives? One trapped by debt, the other quietly building freedom. The answer isn't that one earned more, it isn't that one got lucky, and it definitely isn't that one stopped enjoying life. The difference began with a handful of decisions so ordinary that almost everyone makes them without thinking. Let me show you how debt doesn't usually ruin a life overnight. It quietly rewrites it, one monthly payment at a time. Jake and Michael started at the same software company just a week after graduating college. Both were 27. Both earned $75,000 a year. Both received the same health benefits, the same annual raises, the same bonus structure. On paper, they were living identical lives. 6 months after starting the job, they both decided it was time to replace their aging cars. Jake walked into a dealership with one question. "What's the monthly payment?" The salesman smiled. "I think we can make this fit your budget." Notice what never came up during that conversation. The total price, the interest, the amount Jake would eventually pay. Everything revolved around one number, $689 a month. It sounded manageable. Michael visited the same dealership 2 days later. He drove the exact same SUV. He loved it. Then he looked at the final paperwork. After taxes, fees, and interest, the vehicle would cost him almost $53,000. He quietly thanked the salesman, walked out, and bought a reliable 3-year-old model from a private seller instead. His friends laughed. "You can obviously afford something nicer." Michael smiled. "I probably can. But I'd rather own my money than have my money own me." Nobody thought much about those conversations. Life moved on. A few months later, Jake upgraded his phone. The advertisement barely mentioned the price. Instead, it said, "Only $49 a month." The old phone still worked perfectly, but the new one had a brighter screen, better cameras, and artificial intelligence features everyone was talking about. So he upgraded, not because he needed it, because it didn't feel expensive. Then came a vacation. Why wait? The travel website offered 12 easy monthly payments, then new furniture, 0% financing, a smartwatch, a gaming console, a home theater. Each purchase felt harmless by itself. After all, what was another $40, another $60, another $90? Individually, they barely made a dent. Together, they quietly transformed his paycheck before it even reached his wallet. This is something behavioral economists have studied for years. Our brains don't naturally think in total cost. They think in monthly affordability. $500 a month feels small. $50,000 feels enormous. Businesses understand this better than most consumers ever will. That's why nearly everything today is sold one payment at a time. Cars, phones, furniture, mattresses, exercise equipment, even groceries in some cases. The goal isn't to make something cheaper. It's to make it feel cheaper. Michael approached every purchase differently. Before buying anything over a few $100s, he asked himself a simple question. If I had to pay the full amount today, would I still buy it? Sometimes the answer was yes. Most of the time, it wasn't. Instead of upgrading every time his salary increased, he let his raises quietly improve his balance sheet instead of his lifestyle. No one noticed. His apartment looked ordinary. His car looked ordinary. His clothes looked ordinary. If you met Jake and Michael at a neighborhood barbecue, almost everyone would assume Jake was doing better financially. He drove the nicer vehicle. He carried the newest phone. He always seemed to have something new. Michael looked average, but appearances can be incredibly expensive because debt has a strange way of making today's life look richer while quietly making tomorrow's life poorer. And neither man fully understood that yet. The real difference between them wouldn't appear in the first year, or even the second. It would begin when life did what life always does. It became unpredictable. Life has a habit of testing every financial plan. Sometimes it's dramatic. Most of the time it isn't. One Tuesday morning, Jake's SUV needed an unexpected repair that wasn't covered under warranty. The bill came to $1,900. He didn't have $1,900. So he reached for the same credit card he'd promised himself he would pay off months ago. It'll only be there for a month, he told himself. It wasn't. A few months later, his apartment lease increased. His insurance premium went up. Groceries became more expensive. Nothing catastrophic happened. Everything just became slightly more expensive at the same time. That's how financial pressure usually arrives. Not like a hurricane, more like a slow leak. One bill here, another payment there. A small emergency, a little inflation. Individually, none of them seem life-changing. Together, they quietly become overwhelming. Michael experienced the exact same economy. His rent increased too. His insurance became more expensive. His car eventually needed repairs. But there was one important difference. He had built an emergency fund before life demanded one. Instead of borrowing money to solve problems, he used money he already owned. That single difference kept one emergency from becoming years of debt. Here's something most people never realize. Debt isn't expensive only because of interest. It's expensive because it steals your future decisions. Jake wanted to change jobs, but the new company offered slightly lower pay during the first year. He couldn't afford it. His monthly payments had already decided for him, and he wanted to move closer to family. The higher rent made that impossible. He wanted to start a small business on weekends, but every extra dollar already belonged to lenders. His debt wasn't just costing money anymore. It was quietly choosing his life. Meanwhile, Michael received the exact same opportunities. When a better position opened at a smaller company, he accepted it without hesitation. When his sister needed temporary financial help after a difficult divorce, he wrote the check without creating a financial crisis for himself. When the stock market dropped sharply one autumn, he wasn't forced to sell investments to cover bills. Instead, he continued buying. The freedom wasn't found in his bank balance. It came from having choices. This is why economists often describe debt as reducing financial flexibility, but those words don't quite capture the feeling. Imagine every paycheck arriving with someone else's name already written across half of it. Before you've lived a single day, you've already spent it. That's what consumer debt quietly becomes. 5 years after they started working together, Jake and Michael sat across from each other during lunch. Jake sighed as he looked at his banking app. "I make more money than I ever have," he said. "So why does it always feel like I'm behind?" Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question. "Do you remember your first car payment?" Jake laughed. "Yeah, it didn't seem like a big deal." And then came the phone, the furniture, the vacation, the credit card, the subscriptions, the refinance. Jake stared quietly at the table. None of those decisions had felt irresponsible. Each one had seemed completely reasonable. That was the frightening part. Debt rarely arrives disguised as a mistake. It usually arrives disguised as convenience, as affordability, as something you've earned. Research consistently shows that people are far more likely to buy something when they're shown the monthly payment instead of the total price, because your brain naturally compares today's payment, not tomorrow's consequences. That's exactly why companies advertise only $19 a month instead of $2,000. They're selling comfort, not cost. By the end of their 7th year at the company, both men had earned almost exactly the same total income. Jake had simply sent a much larger portion of his toward interest, toward minimum payments, toward yesterday's purchases. Michael had sent his toward ownership, toward investments, toward future freedom. The difference between them wasn't intelligence. It wasn't discipline in the heroic sense either. Michael wasn't constantly resisting temptation. He simply built a system that made good decisions easier than bad ones. He learned to ask one question before every major purchase. Will this payment make my future life easier or harder? That single question quietly filtered out hundreds of unnecessary decisions over the years. Eventually, Jake began asking it too. He sold the SUV, paid off his highest interest credit card first, stopped financing things he could wait for, built a small emergency fund, then another. Progress wasn't dramatic. It was slow, sometimes frustrating, but every debt he eliminated returned another piece of his paycheck, another piece of his freedom. Because that's the part most people misunderstand. The opposite of debt isn't wealth. The opposite of debt is choice. The choice to leave a job that no longer respects you. The choice to help your family without borrowing. The choice to sleep peacefully when an unexpected bill arrives. The choice to invest in opportunities instead of paying for yesterday. Jake and Michael started with the same salary. For years, Jake looked wealthier. He drove the nicer car, owned the newer gadgets, lived the more impressive lifestyle. But appearances are easy to finance. Freedom isn't. That's why the people who quietly become financially secure often look surprisingly ordinary. Their money isn't parked in driveways. It isn't sitting in shopping bags. It isn't hiding inside monthly payments. It's quietly buying something far more valuable. Options. Peace in the ability to decide what tomorrow looks like. Because in the end, debt doesn't steal your money first. It steals your choices. And once your choices disappear, your paycheck no longer belongs entirely to you.